Hello, everyone. This is the Rust core team starting the first live broadcast of the Foundation Conversation. So first off, I want to kick off by thanking everyone for being here and answering all or asking all of your questions. It's been great to give that feedback and narrow in on some of our thinking as we sort of announce all of this. And the first thing I want to do is talk about sort of where you can find all of the details here. So we have the project sort of repository, which is the Foundation FAQ repository. Ashley, is there a chance we could get a link on somewhere?
Yeah, I'll try and get that broadcast.
Okay. While we get the technical details here figured out, I want to give us a chance to introduce ourselves. So I am Mark. I am on the core team and release team, and I've been sort of helping out with some of the communications around this effort. Nico?
Hi. So yeah, I'm Nico Matsakis. I'm on the core team, laying team, and compiler team. I've been helping set up the foundation, and I've been involved in Rust for a long time now, going since 2011. So been a while.
And what is your involvement in the foundation effort, Nico?
I think I said it, didn't I? All right, I'll say it again. I'm helping to set up the foundation. I'm in the foundation project group in particular. Maybe that's what you're looking for. And yeah, that's what I've been doing. I'm pretty excited
Ashley?
about it.
Hi, I'm Ashley Williams. I'm on the Rust core team. I've been a member of many teams over the years, but at this point, my role on core takes up almost all of my time. And I've also been working on at the Rust Foundation project group, doing all sorts of things.
Okay, well, I don't know. I guess we can get started. So the first thing I want to do is ask Ashley. So a lot of people have been sort of interested in this. What is the foundation for? What are we doing? Why are we even setting up a foundation? Who are we doing it for? And let's talk about that. I guess let's start off with sort of this more broad question of why are we setting up a foundation?
Why are we setting up a foundation? Well, there's a lot of answers to that involve many strange things that happened over the course of 2020. But I think the really positive answer here is Rust is growing really, really rapidly. And we've kind of gotten to the point where it's time for us to kind of own our own independent kind of structure. And this is partially because we're seeing a lot of attention from a lot of folks wanting to use Rust, and because of our team structure, we're like incredibly large and distributed set of teams. The kind of management and operations necessary for the type of project like Rust is just incredibly huge. And so I don't know if this is perhaps what you're getting at, but from this, you might gather that we are not setting up a foundation to drive adoption of Rust. We have the really lucky problem that Rust is getting adopted completely on its own. And so the real goal of the foundation is to help the project cope with that exponential growth and adoption.
Nico, do you have anything to add on that point?
Yes, I think I do. I would say, I think one of the things I'm really excited about with the foundation is we've seen a lot of adoption of Rust. And what I'm really excited to see is have us go from a phase of companies using Rust to companies getting involved in Rust at a deeper level, right? And that's been happening kind of slowly. And I think we're going to see it pick up a lot with the foundation. And I'm pretty excited. I think that's going to bring a lot of lots of things, a lot of resources, but a lot of people and a lot of interaction and more collaboration. And I think it's going to be good for Rust.
Yeah, so to lead up on, sort of follow up on that, sort of a lot of us have been on the project, and I know myself thinking sort of how is this, big effort going to touch on my work in the project? And I'm wondering, Ashley, if you can sort of talk a little bit about how sort of the individual people working in Rust and sort of making pull requests or translating or moderating and sort of all the great work those teams do, what can they expect?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. It's definitely not going to be like the flick of a light switch, right? Like it's not going to be like we've incorporated a foundation and then like everyone goes, oh, and it's like suddenly, I don't know, everything that we type is covered in glitter or something. I mean, that's not a bad idea, actually. I'll pose that to the foundation.
First purchase order.
Yeah, we just got to send glitter bombs to all of the team maintainers. But I would say, and I think to any of the maintainers out here listening, I think over particularly the last 2 to 3 years, as Rust's community has grown tremendously, these like the true like openness of Rust, which is a value that everyone really, really loves about Rust. The cost of that value is something that we've been feeling pretty hard. And it's tough because it's hard when something that you like really love so much kind of ends up hurting you. And so I think what we've seen with our maintainers is that they're really feeling this really classic kind of asymmetrical power structure that open source shows up, which is that to a certain extent, success can lead to like some really intense failure moments because you can end up with so many more users than you have maintainers. And so what I would say is, as you've been working on Rust, you have almost certainly been feeling some pinches as you've been participating. And I think it's really the goal of the foundation to help us identify those pinches and try to alleviate them. This is a very blunt kind of example, but I think we've talked about having RFCs with 300 comments on them, and we go, oh my goodness, 300 comments on an RFC. And I go, with the way we're seeing Rust grow today, like we're going to end up with an RFC with 3,000 comments, and we're not ready to handle that. And I don't want our maintainership to have to handle that with no resources on its own. And so I'm really excited because I think figuring out how to scale that open consensus like value in Rust is like really going to be one of the biggest charges of the foundation.
I know I'm excited. Nico, do you want to talk about some of these pinches that you've been feeling and how excited you are about getting them solved?
Yes, I do. I'm so I think there's a lot of levels, right? And one of the things, I mean, there's kind of some very easy, very tangible benefits I think we can expect from having a foundation. I think we'll be able to coordinate resources. One thing that people ask for a lot when they come to contribute to the compiler, the first thing they notice is like, oh, it takes a really long time and stuff like that. And they notice, or it takes a lot of memory and things like that. And one of the things we've kicked around is, I wonder if we could set up like some way to help people get builds. And I don't know if we'll be able to do that in the foundation or not, but it seems like with a foundation, we can have that conversation and we can start looking around for maybe you can do cloud builds or something like that, right? But that kind of thing is like the obvious level, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I think we're going to probably find a lot of those little things we can do with resources that we didn't have that will make a big difference. What's going to be a little bit the next level up, let's say, is really focusing on the pathway from beginning contributor all the way up to like sort of team lead or whatever, and seeing at each point in that step, are there kind of organizational things we can do or blockers we can remove that were limiting us before. And it's something we've put energy into, but I think we found it hard to keep that sustained focus. And I think the foundation will help us do that, and I'm pretty excited. I think that's going to be like I keep having the feeling that with all the excitement and all the people who are coming into Rust, if we can find ways to kind of capture more of that and take advantage of more of that, we're going to be able to do a lot of stuff. and that's sometimes I feel like we lose some of it on the side because we just can't get it organizationally together to take advantage of people, and they wind up getting frustrated. They go off and watch Netflix or whatever they do instead of.
Is that what you do, Nico?
No comment.
Fair.
Nothing wrong with watching Netflix.
The compiler builds are very long, so I don't know. Like Netflix is sometimes a valid strategy for, as you wait for that build.
I have had the compiler and the streaming thing in parallel, definitely more than once.
So Ashley, one thing I'm wondering, sort of Nico has talked about how we can sort of utilize this infrastructure. And I think we sort of have talked a little bit about sort of the, more mundane infrastructure. But one thing we haven't really touched on is sort of the more human side of like, can we expect mentoring or maybe some resources for moderation team, or, even, parachuting in people with skills that maybe we don't really know about, especially for our volunteers.
I'm just imagining like a parachute that has the Rust logo on it, and it's like really good, like a maybe even a Ferris-shaped parachute. That sounds awesome. Someone who's a balloon maker, get on that. But yeah, I mean, the metaphor the core team often uses in their RustConf keynote is like people systems, like we're people systems programmers to a certain extent. And I think to the same way that we can look forward to the foundation being able to be able to, support and produce some infrastructure that is sorely needed for maintainers. I also, when I think about the sheer scale of the people we have, there's also a fair amount of people infrastructure that I think we'd really benefit from. And so one of the effects of the extremely distributed team structure that we have that I think a lot of people don't think about a lot is because we have so many independent teams, that means that the Rust organizational structure actually demands significantly more contributors that are managers than ever, like in many open source projects. Being a manager is a real skill. You can't just kind of like wake up one day and do it. I feel like management is kind of like design and teaching, where like kind of on first glance, you're like, oh, I could probably do that. And then you start doing it and you're like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of subtlety here. And so as we continue to think about having to scale the growing Rust project, we see a lot of people stepping up into leadership roles, and they kind of step up into like a void. And I think that it would be really helpful if there was more of a guided moment where we could offer leadership training, management training, and like also just resources for helping manage these things, from basic things like project management to I think potentially more interesting things if we think about like product management and like even design work. Like there's a lot of really fascinating organizational research out there about how to do that. And while Rust doesn't do a lot of inventing technology from first principles, I do think just because of a lack of resources, we've invented a fair amount of management from first principles. And with the foundation, I look forward to being able to bring in sponsors who have like a depth of knowledge there that we'll be able to learn from, but also just to be able to gain resources and help to distribute those to the folks that are kind of find themselves as the leader in a way that they might not have expected.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say one of the things that you made me think of there, Ashley, is in the compiler team, we've set up a bunch of working groups and so on. And one of the observations we made kind of coming at I don't remember when this was, but last time we had like a retro or something where we were discussing what was our experience. And one of the biggest problems was, basically being a lead of a working group is really hard. And that there was just, it takes a lot of energy, of course, and keeping on top of things, but also that there's a need to kind of guide people and give them more structure of how to do it, of how, help to break down, well, this is the task you want to achieve. Let's sharpen that. Let's figure out the steps we can actually use. And we've talked a lot about how to achieve it. And I'm not sure exactly, it's still going to be an open problem we'll be iterating on for a while, but I feel pretty confident that we will find that the foundation helps us here and offers us some tools that we were lacking. Another thing that I was just thinking about is that I think would be great is getting, this product management that you mentioned, getting help in kind of assessing people's needs and making sure we're doing a really good, thorough job of that, so we can figure out what to prioritize. I think that's been a challenge for us sometimes.
So
there's so many wonderful things to do.
When you say people's needs, are you talking about maintainers there, or sort of the general Rust community, or
which constituency?
I know.
I'm the worst. I know.
I'm talking about. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about all the needs. I think we should assess everyone's. But I'm talking about. I think maintainers could use help in assessing users' needs. Is actually what I'm saying. So there is a maintainer's need at the root here, but it is related to end users and things like that as well. I think we do things like we use the survey, and well, anyway, we make a lot of attempts and we do really work at it, but it's a tricky topic.
So along those lines of sort of survey work and others, sort of figuring out how do end users fit into the foundation, and there's this question to some extent of sort of we're focusing so much on maintainers, and maintainers definitely want to focus on end users too, but I think, at least for me, one of the questions I've had is sort of how do we fit this structure of maintainers focusing on end users and foundation, and sort of what is the relationship we're looking there for, especially as we think about sort of our purpose being maintainers, but then sort of it feels like why are we focusing on maintainers and users, right? We want to drive people to be enthusiastic about Rust, not about Rust development so much.
Yeah, it definitely could seem maybe somewhat backwards to have a foundation that is focused on the maintainers. Like maybe not even backwards, maybe even worse, like maybe selfish. Like, oh, the Rust project wants to create a foundation for itself. And I know, at least for me, like part of this is motivated by what I've seen as trends kind of in what I'd call like the economics of open source, where there's these affordances for expectations where in many circumstances, like especially I'd say like commercial software, like the users are often the least well-served constituency. They're given the least power, the least visibility. And I would say in open source maintainers don't really hit the top of the list for any of those things either. And part of that's because many people have kind of aliased open source to be free. There's like just an expectation that the project is there and it's there for the taking, and that those people's time, they owe you, like they owe their users stuff. And so there's that kind of in the background. There's been some really interesting writing on it. I think Nadia Engvall kind of writing about like the unspoken infrastructure of open source, but I don't know. There's some stat about like most people maintain open source out of guilt, and I think that's like just really, really sad. And I got to be honest, I have absolutely felt that way before. And what I realized is that with foundations, if the goal of a foundation is to support adoption, to support end users, there's a weird distrust there. Whereas we need an organization to center the users and tell the developers what to do. And that I think that's just not really aligned with Rust values at all. I think that if we keep the folks who are working on Rust well-resourced, well-supported, and happy, they're going to build the best Rust for end users that's possible. And I don't think a separate organization is going to really be able to move the needle on that. I think the folks that are working on the projects really understand the problems and are incredibly motivated to build something that's powerful and ergonomic, and that what's really just getting in their way are these systems these systems that make their job incredibly difficult to do because they are but one person and there is an intensely large growing number of people using Rust. So to kind of balance that equation, I think having the foundation on those folks' side is going to be how we end up with the absolute best Rust.
Yeah, so as you've referenced economics here, I think the obvious question to everyone is sort of, can maintainers expect to be paid by the foundation? Is that what we're going for here, or what's the story for maintainers? Like,
I've been talking a lot. I don't know, Nico.
Yeah,
do you want to take
Nico,
this one?
you should talk about this.
The answer is largely no, but we're not. The role of foundation is not to directly hire people. Let's say to hire everyone who works on Rust, and there's a lot of reasons for this. I mean, I think a big part of it is we just couldn't do a very good job. Like, there's a lot of people working on Rust, and it would take a lot of managerial infrastructure, and it's a hard thing to hire and really maintain someone very well, right? And what we would do a much better job of doing is incentivizing people who work like companies that rely on Rust and helping them and getting them to hire developers and support those developers, which they're already geared up to do, right? And I think that has a side benefit, which is that how Rust will work best, how open source works best, in my opinion, is when you have kind of a lot of companies coming, not just companies really, a lot of people and contributors from different backgrounds, which may include companies, coming together to work and solve, common problems, right? And I think that's what, like, when we made things like the RFC process with Rust, we did that because we knew that we needed input from all kinds of people if we were going to make these designs good, or else they're just going to be tailored to like the side of the problem that you see, you the designer, and not the other constraints that you're not aware of. And I think if we tried to just pay everyone from one central source, that would step right into that trap. Not to mention that it just wouldn't work. Not to say we can't pay anyone. I think there's definitely a role for hiring people, but we would be looking for, critical roles that enabling roles, like infrastructure-based is the most obvious one.
I think they call it, I was going to say multipliers, and then I was going to make a joke about 10x programmers.
I was debating whether to say multiplier. Yes, multiplier roles. But we're all multipliers. Anyone who works on Rust is a multiplier, right?
Yeah, yes. I agree with that.
Building a tool that everyone uses. But yes, we will be picking and choosing very carefully the roles, I think, that make the most sense for the foundation to do specifically.
Yeah, I want to go back to a thing that you touched on about incentivizing companies to hire folks who are working on Rust. So one of the things that you see a lot when an open source technology starts getting really popular is, so you start out, you've got a programming language, there's kind of the early adopters, the early hackers that are like getting really into it, working directly on it. And slowly that becomes something that folks are really excited about. And companies start going, I want to write my software in this. And they go, who better to write this software than the person who wrote this language? That would be a really great idea. And it is a really amazing idea. But what can happen if you're not careful is that then all of the people who are working on the language suddenly head on out to all of these companies to work on that product. And there's nobody left working on the language. You kind of see this moment when this adoption happens and you have this kind of brain drain. And so I think one of the critical things for the Rust Foundation to be doing in particular is to be creating a system of affordances that really incentivizes folks to invest in keeping engineers working on the Rust programming language. And I think some of the old models of just assuming that those folks will want to do that like purely on a volunteer basis, when say a company might want to offer them like a very high salary to say work on the product instead, I think that that's really difficult. And so I think it is the Rust Foundation's responsibility and the folks who are participating in it to make sure that we're able to keep working on Rust itself, not working in Rust, and a really attractive option, because what you'll often see is you have that language, everybody leaves to go work in that language, and then eventually that language starts kind of losing that awesome value that made everybody want to write stuff in it in the first place. And so this is really a critical moment to like make us like that we're to pass, like we're really going to need to figure out how to do that retention. And I think it's really interesting, but I see it as one of the most important roles for the foundation to really focus on making sure that's the case. And if it's not, we're going to fix it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's even maybe a little more than just incentivizing, like, but also guiding and like helping people understand what the right way to interact with the project and so forth is. That requires a lot of engagement. But.
Yeah, I'll speaking to the Rust community out there, I don't think you know how intimidating to a certain extent you are. You're like the values driven like community that we've built. Folks really respect it, and they're cautious about making sure they participate because they really want to make sure that we preserve it as we go through this kind of like next moment for Rust.
Yeah, so we've talked quite a bit about sort of the more concrete benefits in some sense, but we haven't really talked or a lot about the sort of shape of how the foundation is going to maybe influence decisions or sort of make changes in the project, and sort of the system, like if I'm a maintainer, who do I go to? How do I make this, proposal or whatever? Nico, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Talk about it because there's not that much to say. The foundation won't. I mean, I think the foundation is there to support this teams that we have built, not to sort of replace them or change the way that they work. Right? It's not going to change the way that RFC process works.
So the board isn't going to make async a postfix operate now.
I mean a prefix. No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, like certainly like technical decision making, but not just technical, just the decision making that teams have been doing stays with the teams. But what they now have that they didn't have before is kind of more resources that they can draw on, right? And they have a new kind of way to enable them. And I think that exactly how much and how we lean on it will depend team to team, and it's something we're going to be figuring out. But that's the way to think about it.
Ashley, do you want to elaborate on that, or do you think that covered it? Is there more to say?
I mean, I definitely think like Rust has built out a really fantastic set of governance, and honestly, with my experience with foundations and boards, like a single board on a foundation wouldn't be able to make all the decisions that the Rust project's able to make. Like if it meets like say once a month, even like the number of decisions that our governance is making day to day. Even if we were to somehow decide that we wanted that to happen, I think it would be impossible. So, but that's really not the type of decision making that the foundation will be making. I think instead it's going to be a lot more about thinking about how can we make strategic investments in the organization so that folks can feel like that contributing to Rust is improving and is like a joy, I think, as Nico likes to say.
I do like the word joy. Joyful contribution. Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing, I feel like Nico and Mark can be like, Ashley, why are you doing this? Here, I'll just do it.
Now I'm a little worried.
Yeah, I know, right? So one of the really interesting things about our extremely distributed governance system is that decision making is again distributed to a large number of teams. And the strength of Rust is in the strength of those teams. And as we scale and as we see adoption of Rust, I think that we've already been feeling pressure on that governance. And so I think if you want to be worried, I think the thing to be worried about is not necessarily that the foundation is going to take things over, but that Rust governance is not going to have the support and the resources it needs to be able to scale to the amount of people that are coming in. Like, one of the things that open source projects usually like to see is like, oh my gosh, like, let's get more and more contributors. Let's see that contributor graph go up. And I have to assume that if I were to show a graph like that, there would be a not insignificant number of our maintainers who would go, oh my goodness. And that's really too bad, because I think in our hearts, we really want contributing to Rust to be something that everybody can do. But our current governance structures and management structures are really not ready to be able to like handle that influx yet. And so what I'm really looking forward to is getting to a place where we can beef up is a horrible metaphor for someone who is vegetarian to say. But I feel like we've been using it a lot in the core team lately. I don't know who started that. But anyways, like really looking to mature our governance process. And like
2-to-1 here, just saying.
What?
I said we outnumber the meat eater, the carnivores in this call, if I'm not mistaken. But
are you just trying to say that Mark eats meat? No meat shaming in the live broadcast, Nico. We didn't talk about this. Oh my goodness. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the chronic problem that we should be worried about when we think about decision making in the Rust project is, or the thing that we should be worried about is not the idea that the foundation is going to decide to introduce a new keyword. It's that our governance structures are not going to scale at the rate that they need to and mature in a way that will be able to maintain our values. And so I feel like everyone's going to be like, Ashley, are you like a cloud CEO now? Because you said scale like 500 times. Somebody make the meme about like, is Rust web scale, please? This is a bad idea. Anyways, like that's the thing that keeps me up at night is like, how are we gonna keep these teams operating, and give them the capacity that they need for like the next 5 years of Rust. And so that's why when I think about decision making, the foundation doesn't make me as scared, because I see it as a way to help us solve the other problem I'm worried about.
Yeah, that is definitely a rising and growing challenge. I think it is something, I mean, it's a place we put a lot of energy and we will continue to do so. And I think we're making a lot of progress at adapting our processes to the sort of, well, it's not just about rising, more and more people coming in, right? It's about sort of having to juggle more and more complex constraints. And I don't know, it seems like as Rust is getting, maybe it's just my perspective where I'm coming from, but I like the part of Rust that I'm working on the most. But I feel like, you know, for one thing, as the margin, as Rust is getting more and more used in production, we have to kind of ensure that we keep the quality higher on a constant basis, and we have to make sure we're considering, as we are designing these newer features and so on, like taking into account all the different ways people might use them. I think the async design is a good example. It just had an enormous number of constraints trying to be met. It was very complicated and took a long time and had a lot of back and forth, and that was a big challenge. That I think we met very well, but that was harder than other kinds of designs we've had to do, where we were smaller and had able to move more nimbly.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. As we think about like making Rust ergonomic, like I always say, like ergonomics is familiarity. And so as the user base of Rust grows and diversifies and the types of things that people are using Rust for grows, the number of constraints on designs like that are going to become more and more complex. And so managing stuff that's more complex with even more humans.
Yeah, well, definitely an interesting area. I guess one thing that I'm sort of wondering, as you say, sort of this async problem and sort of going in that direction. I know that we have sort of a number of sort of features in the language pipeline, but there's also this aspect of sort of Rust community at large, and sort of how we're thinking about sort of conferences and all of these people who are forming meetups and so forth. I'm wondering, Ashley, if you want to talk about sort of how we're thinking the foundation is going to interact with, a community that's literally in probably at this point every country in the world, thinking about Rust or even meeting and so forth.
My first thought was, is Antarctica a country? Anyways, if someone has brought Rust to Antarctica, please tweet at me. Yeah, so I think something that's really exciting about Rust is, like, as a project, kind of without its own legal entity, it has already built out the functionality that is often kind of like the first task of like a early open source software foundation. So I think this kind of comes from the fact that from early on, I don't know the origin of this, maybe Nico, you do, but there's always been this thought that like we treat Rust like a product. And so unlike maybe other groups of engineers, like marketing was less of a bad term for us. And it's something that we kind of actively leaned into. And I think those kind of early attitudes helped shape I'd say like a really mature, particularly events ecosystem that, like, I guess the foundation could run events, but we really don't need that. I mean, RustFest just announced its own organization to help incubate and run events. I won't summarize that more because I don't want to get it wrong, but check out the new RustFest initiative that they're doing. But we've seen so many independent conferences pop up, and I mean, even some of the meetups that we have that call themselves meetups, like, probably shouldn't, because they're on the scale of like more than 100 people attend. So these are basically mini conferences that people are calling meetups. And I think trying to make a foundation the center of everything that owns everything would be really a mistake. The foundation, at least the way I would hope to see it, would be a player in the community, right? Like, there's a large ecosystem of Rust, and like the foundation is but a part. And so when I look to how the foundation might support a community, like I'm recalling, I don't know if it was an all hands or an Impl days, but I remember being in the Mozilla office in Paris, and folks from the event team were running kind of like a Teach the Teachers event, except it was for event organizers. And I think things like that are really critical. I know as a teacher myself, like Teach the Teacher events are such, force multipliers. And so I think instead of necessarily seeing the foundation spin up its own events potentially, I definitely see it doing more of the facilitation, like treating our community members like the maintainers they are, and helping facilitate their ability to do the knowledge sharing that they've been doing over the past couple of years.
Yeah, so to follow up on that, I know we've sort of talked a little bit about this before, but one of the things that we've sort of been thinking about, especially this year, I know we didn't manage to run a all hands, and sort of there's lots of reasons for that. And in some sense, it was actually good because, it was scheduled for when the pandemic was already sort of in high flight. So that would have been complicated. But
it's changed a lot between December and March.
A lot of things, yes.
But one of the things that sort of I'm wondering is, how is the foundation going to, help guide us as maintainers to sort of also have our own events, maybe, or sort of interact better at sort of maybe community run events? Like, what's the story there?
Oh, I'm kind of excited about this, I have to say, because one of the things that came out from the all hands, the fact when it didn't happen was disappointing, but it was also a moment where we spent a little time thinking about, like, next year we should think about what the all hands ought to look like, actually, because as Ashley was saying, like, Rust has been growing and growing, and it's not clear whether the all hands as it was is exactly the right structure as we get larger and larger. Maybe we want to have more targeted ones. Maybe we want to do different formats. I don't know. I'm excited to see us experiment here a little bit and try different things. I think it's really critical that we introduce, let's say, more high bandwidth sync modes of interaction for the teams. And I don't know at what point, like whether that's going to be flying to the same place or, I don't know. That there's a lot of question marks, but I'm really excited about doing that. But I think we should look and experiment with exactly what that actually means. It may not be the all hands as we do it. Maybe something better.
Ashley, so Nico touched a little bit on the sort of all hands itself, but what are you thinking about sort of sending people to conferences in the world, like maintainers, giving talks or other ways of interacting with the community? Like, is that in scope? Is it out of scope?
So I want to avoid being too prescriptive because we're going to have a board full of, I don't know who they all will be yet, but some of the people that I think might be are really awesome humans who I think have some really great ideas. But when I think about if I got to decide what the board did in some magical world where that might happen, when I was evaluating a proposal, I would just continue to ask myself the question, how does this help maintainers do their job better? And so I definitely think something that would definitely help maintainers is being able to help support them, particularly I think that the high bandwidth, high sync communication, as someone who has probably been I like working remote forever, it's so critical. And I think especially over this year, we've really felt that pain of just missing that social touch from folks. And these teams are solving really hard problems. And I think it's important that folks have a social connection. So I could imagine that those things would be in scope. Really just, if you ask yourself, does this help maintainers get their work done? That's at least the first bar in my mind.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about how, I don't know. I think something I think we've talked about doing things like supporting, maybe helping conferences to organize adjacent events and things like that. That might be an interesting way to go. When we've done that, I think it's always been really great. So it's something I
think that's partially because whenever anyone's at a Rust conference, they're like, why isn't this a whole week? We just want to hang out forever, which is true. And I agree with that. So that's always nice.
I was just thinking about a lot of the great people in the community that I first met at those kind of events. So they're definitely a great place to bring people in and get them. I think, how can I say, that we were talking earlier about that conversion up the ladder and so forth. And I think sometimes it is easier to help pull someone along when you have just some face time to get to know them better and pay them concentrated attention. So if we can do more to enable that, I think it'll be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I would love more sync time with all of core, at least. I know that much. And everybody on the Rust project is really great to spend time with. I have fond memories of the all hands.
Haven't we been on Zoom together for the last month?
Yeah, it's not face. It's something else.
I know it's not the same. It's not the same. Oh man.
Sad but true. Yeah. We need 3-dimensional. Never mind.
What?
Virtual reality will change it all.
Now you have to tell us.
We got to send every Rust contributor 3D hardware. And
oh my goodness! All right.
Are you telling me that's not on the table?
I guess what is it? Oculus, if you're watching, are you interested in in sponsoring us. I just realized I have like
contributions we're looking for.
Look at my video. It's got like a weird thing on it. Anyways, I don't know what's up. My digital eyeball has like a interesting artifact on it.
I noticed that.
And you didn't tell me? Gosh. You're the type of person who lets someone have spaghetti on their face the whole dinner, aren't you? That is a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess sort of as we close out, sort of, we have roughly 15 minutes left. So I want to pivot a little bit to sort of, we've talked a lot about how maintainers, and towards the beginning, we talked a little bit about how sort of we see maintainers being empowered to do, better work, or sort of more work in some sense, and more maintainers giving us a better access to a better Rust.
It didn't sound good.
That is not the spirit of the endeavor. Nico, you have to explain yourself. That is no good.
We're gonna get every line of code out of them.
Just to do more of the work that they want to do, and a lot less of the work that no one wants to do.
Like, you're empowering.
Dismiss 500 GitHub notifications.
Oh man, yeah, this is it.
Is this about to become about GitHub notifications?
If I'm on the board, go on. We're not going there.
Oh my.
Okay. So we're not going to GitHub notifications. Message taken. I will switch topics then. So I guess, yeah.
That's all I had.
Derailed my train of thought.
I don't even know what you were saying. I have no idea.
So I don't know. Yeah, I guess to get back to this idea of sort of empowering maintainers, giving us a better Rust, being able to do more for our sort of primary constituency of the foundation. One of the things that I think we sort of have talked a little bit about, but haven't talked a lot about, is sort of, if I'm an average Rust user, maybe I've never contributed a patch, sort of what kind of help are we looking for? What are we looking for from people in this week and in the coming weeks? What should they do? If they want to help out, or if they want to give feedback or ask questions, where should they go?
Like help with the foundation effort, you're saying?
Sure. Yeah.
Or just help in general. I mean, I think for helping with the foundation effort, like the thing that there's honestly, it's not something where we need like 100 people volunteering, but what we do need, what is really helpful, is kind of people interacting, raising questions on the repo, and helping us kind of figure out what's on people's minds so that we understand it best and we can explain it better. But for helping with the Rust project, that's a much bigger question. And there's a lot of things going on. I don't know. I won't just say ping me, although it's often what I say. But
Nico, are you sure that that's what?
Nico, we decided we're not talking about GitHub notifications. Like...
I was gonna say, I think we have 130 people watching, so I'm really excited to hear how this is gonna work out for you, Nico. But yeah, I mean, when I think about like how can folks help out with the foundation, everybody who's been asking really thoughtful questions on the GitHub repo, I think that's been really helpful. Like, because of that, we've been able to draft an FAQ that I think has turned out much better than if we had sat down to write it with like just a blank page and we're like, what do we think people want to know? So I know it sounds like extremely cheesy probably, but like keep asking questions. Like it is actually incredibly helpful. And then, yeah, like as far as like helping with the foundation long-term goes, like I don't think that we know yet really like what those opportunities might be. But what I would expect is that like the foundation is going to be working on initiatives that are going to be with the project. And so just participating in Rust and having a desire to make Rust better and wanting to show up and invest time, like I think that's probably the best way to help. Like at the end of the day, helping the foundation is fine, but we're all showing up because we want to build an awesome Rust, and like that's really I think the best way to get involved. Also, the sun is setting over here. Can you tell? I'm like losing. I should have turned lights on before this broadcast. Can you tell this is the first broadcast we're doing?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I think I like the sunset, so you can just stay like that. It's fine.
Okay, you would prefer if I just went into the shadows and let it just be the sunset, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's like random construction cranes and such too. So it's a mixed background.
Yeah, I have a physical instantiation of crane lift just like right outside my window. That's what's going on there. That's how committed I am. No.
I think this last point that Ashley was raising is really good, right? And it's like that we want to have kind of the foundation and the project working together, and it's not like they're two separate entities, each going their own way. So you maybe become a contributor to the foundation or something. It's like they're working on shared goals, like when the project. And so when you want to get involved in Rust, you come to the Rust project and see what's going on, and that you probably won't even know, but you're probably interacting with some resources that the foundation has helped to arrange here or there, but that's not the way that, like, I'm going to say ideally it shouldn't be, it should be supporting, right? I don't know how visible exactly, we'll see, but that's the way we should think about it.
I agree. Well, I guess we have 8 minutes left. We had decided not to solicit questions, but now I'm kind of like, man, that would have been maybe interesting.
Yeah, I'm still scared of following multiple live chats. It's complex.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, I don't want us to have necessarily any dead air. I can ask you, Mark, being our MC, what are you most excited about for the foundation? Like personally.
Personally, I think honestly, with my like infra hat on, I think the most exciting thing for me is for people to like actually give us a budget and like hold us to it. I know that sounds probably very weird, and like it seems weird that like we want limits, but I know that a lot of my work has been sort of designing various systems around Rust, and like especially as we work on like the perf collector, and sort of we need this dedicated hardware, being able to sort of figure out like how do we get it and who do we go to even ask for budget or grants or whatever, has been really difficult, and sort of as another part of that, being able to do things like run surveys more often to sort of figure out like what is actually the thing that users want. We run a yearly survey, and that's like really amazing data, but it is once a year, and has steadily been growing from like maybe 20 questions at the beginning to now I think we have probably hundreds of questions just spread across like multiple different instantiations. So not everybody sees every question, but it's a lot.
Yeah,
So.
Mateo is really upset that we don't translate the survey into dog. So whoever's in charge of that.
I'm actually really excited about this kind of data collection resources. I think that's one thing side note on the survey, an interesting bit of feedback was like basically someone saying that we should, doing one big survey is really great, and I'm glad we do it, but we should also consider doing more like targeted surveys. And I think that is an interesting thing to pursue. For one thing, is a lot less data to crunch, but just to look, like I'd like to follow up on the survey and say, oh, this was an interesting data point. What can we do to understand better, like why people gave that thing 7 out of 10 or something? And that's a really interesting thing. And I don't know, it's been hard to sort of follow up on those kind of ideas. I think we'll have more room for that. One thing I do wonder about, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I'm curious, is also like user studies, because we got the last 5 minutes, we might as well go off script.
We did not have a script.
I know. We've been off script the whole time, people. User studies, like, I'm interested in what more we can do to see sort of people using the language and get kind of a better understanding of the pitfalls and things that they encounter, or like what kind of error messages are most confounding. Which my dream that we would be able to see like I don't know, to get more insight into that and just see this message seems to always lead people down a bad chain. Let's see if we can improve it. That's not.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I feel like I've been like, oh my gosh, the data opportunities, like, and you're like, okay, Ashley.
It's interesting because I think these are both, all these things we're talking about are like, at least exactly that what we were saying with the project and the foundation not being like fully independent but working together. They're both going to take work on both sides, right? So the maintainers designing and thinking about what kind of information they need, and the foundation helping to coordinate those resources and store that data in a sensible way with sensible privacy policies or whatever else we need.
Yeah, I know, at least, I don't know, sometimes I think a lot about the work set in front of all of the Rust teams, and that like, I'm excited for the foundation because I think the foundation works on like a slightly different time scale than the teams does, and that it's well designed to have the time and space to like actually look at, like, I really want to dig into like the GitHub API, and like you're talking about user studies, which I think would be awesome, but classically I'm like, what's the maintainer like experience like? What are the kinds of things? When I was running some data for a presentation I had to do, gosh, I wish I could remember, where's Pietro? Anyways, we were like trying to figure out how many individual like unique GitHub accounts had participated on an RFC. It was a big number. And I think that that's really interesting. And I think there's like, I don't know, probably a lot of like neat research opportunities to like take a look at that data and see like where we could be doing more interesting interventions to make things easier. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of cool stuff we're doing, and the opportunities to get meta about it, I think, are great.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So I guess we have like 2 minutes left, so I don't want to close this out too abruptly. But I guess one thing, Ashley, can you actually put up the blog post link so that we can point people at the next session times and so forth? Because I think one of the things that probably a lot of our viewers are thinking is like, how can I ask a question? You know, you've talked about all these things, and maybe you have follow-ups, or, you know, want to talk to us about one of these things in more detail. And as we've said, it's actually like really interesting. We've had these really long Zoom calls, which are both sort of tiring, but also actually really exciting to, you know, dig into these details and talk to each other. And I know at least I've really enjoyed them, even if it does mean waking up at like very early times.
Curse you Europeans.
Rust is a global project. That is not a good attitude. Oh my gosh, I almost called you Mateo, which is my dog's name. Wow. Anyways, having a complete tantrum directly off screen, so can't wait to get to that. All right. Well.
I'm realizing we never made the really cool logo for the foundation conversation we talked about making, but it's too bad. Oh well.
There's still another half of the week, Nico. We can.
There's time.
It's in the future.
We have some. We'll figure that out, and we'll get the Rust Twitter to tweet it out.
Okay. Well, shall we? I guess I don't know what the procedure here is. Ashley, you're in control of all of the technical bits. Feels so weird.
I want to say thank you. By the way, thanks, Mark. You were wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks for handling this conversation.
Thank you, viewers.
Yeah, I was gonna say I should have been paying more attention to how many people were actually watching, but they're still hanging in there. We have 15 seconds left in theory if we want to go the full hour. But yeah, I was told that we shouldn't just abruptly end it, that we should, kind of say bye and then hold off, because otherwise the video is weird. So, all right.
I'm imagining like
All right. Bye, everyone. We'll be doing this again on Saturday. Woo!
This is true.
All right. Bye.
Ciao.